When it came to Toothless, the more we moved toward Black Panther, which is his inspiration, the less like Toothless he felt. When the eyes got smaller and the mouth got smaller and we reshaped the head, all of a sudden we were losing the character. And so even though he's got that big stitch-like head with the giant eyes and the giant mouth and the ear plates, we needed to keep a certain amount of that to preserve the personality. And then we just leaned much more into the big cats for his musculature and his the way his skin moved over muscle as he was moving, and the iridescence of his scales and all of that. That brought him more into our world. But it was important to like have photoreal, but with personality.
Dean, thank you so much for sharing your time with us on the Movie Podcast today.
I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. It's always lovely to speak to a fellow Canadian as well too. Do you find that you're able to suss out fellow Canadians in the industry when you're working?
They usually let themselves be known. Yeah. Like we're aware of one another. It's like, you're awfully polite.
Yeah. You must be Canadian.
You must be Canadian.
Must be Canadian. We were super lucky to watch this film at CinemaCon back in April.
Oh, great.
And we were there and we were just so moved by your speech before the film. And I think the reception to Dragon there was just amazing. How did it feel kind of coming after that big screening and the reception to that film for you?
It was a relief. It's the first time we showed it to an audience, and we were worried that maybe we didn't do enough or change enough or bring enough dimension and new stuff to the characters, and like getting the response and feeling the love for the original movie reflected in this version without it feeling that we shortchanged it or lost some of the soul in the process was quite validating for all of us.
Yeah, we were truly moved while watching it, and I think the thing that we love so much while watching it is knowing that obviously you were there from, the inception with this series on the big screen with the animated film. How did it come to be that you were the one directing this live action version?
Well, I pitched myself. So Universal contacted me and said, we're kicking the tires on the idea of reimagining this in live action. And even though I had, kind of put the trilogy to bed with that third movie, I felt like that's a decade of my life. I can move on to different stories and different characters. The fact that they were considering it just gave me this knee-jerk response of, I don't want to see someone else's version of this. I'm too protective of the characters and the world, and I know where the heart is. So I said, I get that I haven't made a live action film yet, but please let me do it, because I can guarantee that we import all of the wonder and the emotion of that original into this version.
Did you find it scarier to have this as your first live action film because you were so close to the original material, or did that actually help you? No, actually, like said, I got this. I know where I'm going to take this.
I didn't have that level of confidence, but I knew that I'd seen enough live action remakes to know that that's the common problem, that they lose a sense of what made them special. And just being part of that first production and knowing what the iterations brought us, the stuff that we had set aside, the stuff that made it into the movie, there's something about being part of that history that I think could make this movie special. For better or worse, I wanted to be the one to at least bring it into being, and hopefully invite the conversation of maybe it's better to go to the original filmmakers.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the example. This is going to be what studios are looking to, be like, hey, this works. This can work. And of course. And I love what you said in an interview recently where you're talking about, this isn't replacing what's already there. And I just love for you to, to talk about, when you are approaching a live action version of something that you're so close to, how do you even begin to, want to do something that's different, but also something that's what's familiar to people?
Yeah. It started with that very first conversation when I was speaking to the heads of Universal, and I said, are we talking about a story inspired by How to Train Your Dragon, or something that's closer to the books, or a different timeline, different characters? And they said, no, we want that story, but with everything that live action could bring to it. In other words, more maturity, kind of broader audience. Let it be a nostalgic hug, let it be something that also invites in a fan base that might not have been aware of the movie beforehand. So I was looking for ways to be truly additive. We could explain more about the mythology, how these Vikings came to be on the island of Berk. We could give a little more time and character development to some characters that were underserved, like Astrid in the first movie. and also just really dig into the experience, the immersive quality of the action, and especially the flying.
Yeah.
And really give it its due. Like, make it feel, we weren't going to pull any punches, just make it feel as convincing and palpable and visceral as we could.
Definitely. When you look at other live action films, we've been lucky to speak to some great directors who've worked on them over the years. What are the things that, you take for granted on the animation side that you wish you could get away with in live action? Something that came for recently when we were talking to Dean for Lilo and Stitch. He was like, Lilo's really short, so adapting that for live action was a lot harder. Like, it was something they didn't think about till they started, working on it. What's something in the animated film that you're like, man, this was hard to adapt, or I wish it was as easy as it was on the animated side?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think one of them is just Hiccup. Hiccup was designed to be a pipsqueak in his world. And so production design wise in the animated film, we made everything larger than life. The buildings, the trees, the people, everything just seemed to outsize little Hiccup. But I think as we were narrowing on our casting of Hiccup, and we realized, like, Mason, though he's 15, is not a pipsqueak. He's an average kid at 15. That meant we didn't have to lean into as heavily this idea that he's a tiny kid in an oversized world. We leaned more into his otherness, like he is a misfit. He doesn't follow the Viking creed. He's just always thinking differently, and therefore is treated as somebody who's very different.
Definitely. Were there any conversations ever about, the dragons ever looking more like kind of traditional movie dragons, or was it always like it needs to be that? Because that's one of those things that, you would see get kind of changed down the road, right?
Yeah. I think with the design of the dragons, we first started by considering, my promise was, let's make these dragons feel like any dinosaur in Jurassic Park. They need to be that real. And so with the other dragons, it was easier because they're already quite cartoony. So we could lean more into the animal references, like a crocodile or a tropical bird or a walrus. But when it came to Toothless, the more we moved toward Black Panther, which is his inspiration, the less like Toothless he felt. When the eyes got smaller and the mouth got smaller and we reshaped the head, all of a sudden we were losing the character. And so even though he's got that big Stitch-like head with the giant eyes and the giant mouth and the ear plates, we needed to keep a certain amount of that to preserve the personality. And then we just leaned much more into the big cats for his musculature and his the way his skin moved over muscle as he was moving, and the iridescence of his scales and all of that. That brought him more into our world. But it was important to have photoreal, but with personality.
Right. Dean, we're so grateful for your time. You've made such a beautiful film, and I cannot wait to see what the future is going to be. We know there's the sequel in the work from announced at CinemaCon, but we just cannot wait to see what you do next. You're awesome. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you for your time.